Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Wobble Challenge. And if this is our Destroy Media Narratives, I'm George Samueli. And what I'd like to talk about today is the impending debate at the United Nations Thursday, May the 23rd, to adopt a resolution to make July the 11th a day to commemorate internationally the Srebrenica genocide. Genocide is what they call it. And it's very important to see this proposed resolution for the as a poisonous entity that it is. The Srebrenica is really the defining moment of the new NATO. The Serbs, whom NATO had designated as an enemy, the Serbs are accused of conducting a genocide at Srebrenica, and in response to the horrific depredations of the Serbs, NATO, an apparently moribund organization, an organization that had no role following the end of the Soviet Union and the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, NATO needed to go into action and demonstrate its necessity in the world to punish human rights violators, to punish genocide perpetrators, to show the West to be knights in shining armors, the avenging angels protecting the weak and the vulnerable. This was the defining moment for the new NATO. Just about every aspect of the Srebrenica story is false. You can get a reasonably a full account of what actually happened in Srebrenica in my book, Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War against Yugoslavia. And basically, Srebrenica was a town in the east of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It had been a majority Serb population, and it was largely taken over by the Muslims. And the United Nations Security Council, which at that time was driven by Madeleine Albright, who was the US permanent representative, and by the absence of any resistance from the Russian Federation. The Russian foreign minister at the time was Andrei Kozyrev, now lives in the United States. He was clearly serving the interests of the United States, not those of Russia. But anyway, the United Nations Security Council in 1993 designated Srebrenica as a so-called safe area, that it wasn't to be attacked by the Serbs. Now, one should say right away that it's not a safe area for the Serbs, because, of course, Srebrenica was the center of Bosnian Muslim armed forces. The 28th Division was based in Srebrenica, and this 28th Division used Srebrenica as a base in order to attack the local villages and to conduct massacres against the Serbs. And then when the Serbs retaliated, the media screamed in the way that they usually scream, ignorantly and malevolently, that the Serbs are attacking civilians, the Serbs are attacking a UN-designated safe area. NATO needs to do something. The problem that arose with having Srebrenica and Žepa was very close by Srebrenica, which was also a safe area. The problem was that having these two Muslim enclaves in the east of this purported republic prevented any resolution of the conflict, because the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina could only end through the partition of the republic. So that was the eastern part, which was mainly Serb populated, would become a kind of a Serb entity, the Republika Srpska, and the western part would comprise either a Muslim entity or, as it turned out, a Croat Muslim federation. But the presence of Srebrenica and Žepa there in the east, that would be the territory of a partitioned Bosnia and Herzegovina, prevented any real resolution. And of course, that was the whole purpose. That was why the United Nations Security Council pressed for the creation of these safe areas, because the safe areas would ensure that the partition of Bosnia and Herzegovina could not be accomplished, and therefore the war would never come to an end. So it went on. So from 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995, Srebrenica continued to be the center, supposedly a UN designated safe area, but where there was continual heavy fighting. So finally, in the summer of 1995, the Bosnian Serb forces, led by General Ratko Mladic, decided to take matters into their own hands and try to bring this war to an end. They decided essentially to narrow this entity, compress this entity of Srebrenica and Žepa. But what had happened was that the armed forces, and what they wanted to do was to destroy these armed forces in Srebrenica. Well, these armed forces, the 28th Division, retreated from Srebrenica. They retreated from Srebrenica to the Muslim safe area of Tuzla, which was in the center but west of the republic. Now, what happened was that these 28th Division were retreating across Serb lines in broad daylight, and they suffered heavy casualties. I mean, nobody does that. No sensible army does that. You don't retreat across your enemy lines in broad daylight. You can either surrender, which is fine, or you just simply get shot. And that's what happened to the people who crossed the lines. So when Mladic's forces arrived in Srebrenica, they were kind of astonished to find that there were no soldiers here. Where are the soldiers? They asked the locals, where's everyone gone? Where are the men gone? And they'd got no answers. But Mladic then said to who was left in Srebrenica, which was mainly women and children and old men, he said, well, you can stay or you can go. If you want to leave Srebrenica, then we will provide transportation for you. And many of them decided to leave. And so the Bosnian Serbs provided buses to transport the women, the children, the old men to Muslim-held areas where they wanted to go. Now, those soldiers who retreated, some of them were captured by the Serbs, and then some of them were, as prisoners of war, executed. We don't know how many, but more seriously and more troublingly, we don't actually know who conducted these executions. So we don't know how many were executed, who conducted them, and above all, who ordered these executions, because it's very unclear why there was any need for executing anyone. The one person who came forward and said, yeah, I carried out these executions, was a very, very troubled young man, a deeply uh, you mentally challenged person. His name was Drazen Rademovic. And strangely enough, he was a Bosnian Croat, wasn't even a Serb. And he said that he was a member of a mercenary force. Not really even a force part of the Bosnian Serb. Maybe it was a mercenary force. So it's very, very, very mysterious. So, and very quickly, a kind of a story went out that 8,000 men were massacred, were executed in cold blood. 8,000 men and boys were executed in cold blood. The 8,000 number was invented. I mean, there was no evidence whatever for that 8,000 number. It came about because of a misinterpretation of a Red Cross a memo, which spoke about 8,000 people being missing. But they never said 8,000 had been killed, 8,000 had been executed, or anything. So there were 8,000 unaccounted for. And it happened really almost immediately after the capture of Srebrenica. But it became enshrined in NATO folklore that 8,000 men and boys were executed in cold blood. And then, the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, then started going through all sorts of elaborate mechanisms to try to prove that 8,000 Muslims were indeed executed by the Serbs. So, since nobody knew exactly who was in Srebrenica at the time in July 1995, nobody knew exactly who had left. And the Bosnian Muslim authorities were very, very eager to keep all that quiet. You could essentially just simply invent numbers of people who allegedly were there, who are now missing. We can say that who were dead, and then just say, well, they were all executed by the Serbs. And some of the more honest judges at the ICTY, and there definitely are not many, but some of the more honest judges did raise questions on a very basic level, which was, well, who exactly ordered this? I mean, we keep saying it's this, genocide, but who did it? Is there any evidence pointing to any officer who ordered this execution? And again, we just simply don't know how many were executed. You can find any number of bodies with bullets in them, but you don't know who were the Serbs, who were the Muslims who had been killed while retreating across Serb lines, and who was executed. They weren't interested. I mean, bullet hole is a bullet hole. You can't tell whether how somebody has been killed. Particularly, according to the ICTY, the bodies had been buried and exhumed, and then again they were buried, and again, so it just went on and on. They say, so we really don't know. We know who met what end and in what circumstances. But anyway, we got created, the folklore about Srebrenica. The Serbs, were the evil ones, and they're ones who are accused of conducting the worst, most horrific war crime since World War II. And by doing this, of course, what the Western powers did was to make the Serbs the most demonized, terrible nation on the face of the earth. And ever since then, every year in July, the world holds its breath and gives a prayer and a shudder for those 8,000 Muslim men and boys who were murdered in cold blood by the Serbs. And the genocide was determined by the ICTY. The ICTY said the Serbs committed genocide in Srebrenica. It was always very strange how one can determine that 8,000 constitutes genocide. I mean, the Muslims in Bosnia, they're alive, thriving. The Muslims are Muslims alive in Srebrenica. You know, they have Muslim mayors currently in Srebrenica. And why is it that there was no genocide anywhere else? It's always Srebrenica. I mean, why couldn't there be genocide in Sarajevo? Why couldn't there be genocide in Žepa? But no. The genocide was exclusively in Srebrenica. So the ICTY came via a variety of convoluted arguments that we don't need to go into now to show that this was genocide, so they had to redefine their terms, and it was the most unconvincing piece of reasoning that you'll ever come across. But ever since 1995, the NATO powers have been very eager to push the Srebrenica narrative, you know, because they have to show, well, look at what wonderful people we are. So now what they're doing is to have this UN General Assembly resolution, and it'll mark July the 11th as the day to commemorate Srebrenica. They tried it before in 2015, which was the 20-year anniversary of Srebrenica. That was pushed by the UK at the UN Security Council, but of course the Russians vetoed that plan. So they've had to, so the Western powers have had to go around the Security Council, go to the General Assembly. And it's, you know, the chances are reasonable that they will get somewhere with that, because there are many Muslim countries in the world, and they get a little hysterical. And you know, many of the countries the Muslim countries got themselves heavily involved in the war in Bosnia. I'm thinking particularly of Turkey. This was long before Erdogan, but Turkey was very involved in the war, as was Iran, also heavily involved, and so was Saudi Arabia, including Osama bin Laden, who spent some time during the 90s in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there was a big Muslim pilgrimage to Bosnia to help these wretched Muslims who were being persecuted by the Serbs. So something like that, I mean, the NATO powers are obviously counting that, hey, you know, we can bring back the good old days of the 90s and have the Muslims on our side. You know, hey, look, you can't accuse us of being anti-Muslim over what's going on in Gaza. Look how we supported the Muslims in the 90s against the horrible Serbs. You know, the Serbs were the evil ones, and they're Christians. No, we took the side of the Muslims against the Christians. So don't accuse us of being anti-Muslim. That's the attitude of the Western powers. So let me just show you a little bit about this this coming resolution. The debate is set for Thursday, and here we have this. It was proposed by Germany, and you know, that's exactly what you would expect. And Rwanda. The draft text, co-sponsored by a cross-regional group of countries, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, and council members France, of course, Slovenia, of course, and the United States, would designate the 11th of July as the International Day of Reflection and Commemoration of the 1995 genocide in Srebrenica. And then, of course, it says it condemns any denial of the Srebrenica genocide. Well, who goes around denying the Srebrenica genocide? Well, the Serbs, of course. and the glorification of individuals convicted by the ICTY of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Now, the ICTY was set up by the UN Security Council, but was essentially run by NATO. So Russia really had no say whatsoever in anything about the ICTY. And he went on from, so it was set up in 1993, and it only just shut up shop about a year or so ago. So it went on for 30 years. The overwhelming majority of the defendants at the ICTY were Serbs. There were one or two Croats, and virtually no Muslims. And of course, NATO, that's out of the question. So therefore, when they talk about convicted by the ICTY, war crimes, and genocide. And the other thing is to remember that at the ICTY, no less than 7 Serb presidents were convicted. 7 Serb presidents. And that includes it, like Serbia, you had of genocide. So you had the Serbs of the Republika Srpska, you had the presidents of the Serb Krajina in Croatia, and so on. No one else is in. No one else was ever accused of genocide at the ICTY. Now, then it says, Germany's UN ambassador, Antje Ledenster, said there is an official UN commemoration of the 1994 Rwanda genocide on April the 7th of every year. The Rwanda genocide was also largely a con job pushed by the Western powers, but that's something we can get into it on another occasion. The day the Hutu-led government began the killing of members of the Tutsi minority and their supporters, again, that's a mischaracterization of what actually happened. The draft resolution aims to close the gap by creating a separate UN day to commemorate the victims of Srebrenica in time before the 30th anniversary in 2025. And it says, the resolution has the support of a large cross-regional group and provides an opportunity to reaffirm, we're always doing the reaffirm, the shared commitment of the UN membership to international law and the international judicial order. And now this is the draft resolution. So here's the preamble welcoming the important progress made by international courts in recent years, blah, blah, with respect to the fight against impunity. Again, we know that that's not true. Impunity for some, trials for others. So, and then it says, recognizes in this regard the particular contribution of the ICTY and emphasizes the importance of the international community being prepared to take collective action through the Security Council in accordance with the Charter and on a case-by-case basis. And to ensure accountability and the prevention of genocide. This is always the fluff that goes together with these solemn proclamations. Oh, we're ending impunity. We're bringing to justice. And then this is in order to further reconciliation. We know perfectly well that these types of resolution only cause bitterness and hatred. And that's what they're designed to do. Of course, they're not designed to bring about reconciliation. They're there to fuel these wars. 30 years on, and we're talking about Srebrenica. How on earth can anyone move forward and live with their neighbors when you keep harping on about something that happened 30 years ago? And that's the purpose. And NATO is an organization that sponsors conflict, sponsors division, sponsors bitterness and rifts, and then presents itself as the solution to the problem that it had created. And then it says, reiterating that criminal accountability under international law for the crime of genocide cannot be attributed to any ethnic, religious, or other group or community as a whole. Now, this is a classic. This is, of course, what they tried to do, and the ICTY has always done this. They said, no, we are not doing collective punishment. No, no. We're only going for individuals. We're only going holding individuals accountable. No. We're not whole collective. We're not blaming the Serbs. No. That's not, no, we don't do that. No, it's individual. But of course, who are these individuals? Well, let's see. President Slobodan Milosevic, who was the president of Serbia and president of Yugoslavia. President Radovan Karadzic, who was the president of the Republika Srpska. General Ratko Mladic, who was the commander-in-chief of the Bosnian Serb forces. Milan Martic, president of the Republic of Krajina in Croatia. Goran Hadžić, also president of the Republic of Krajina, Croatia. You get the point. If you hold the presidents and the leaders of a country responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, what have you, if you accuse them, then of course you're attacking the people. Of course, that's what you're doing. I mean, you're not going for some a corporal or a lieutenant or a major. You're going for the president. Well, the presidents are the people who led the Serbs in the 90s. If you hold the people who led the Serbs in the 90s responsible for all these crimes, then of course you're holding the people responsible, because these are the people who followed these leaders and who carried out the orders of these leaders. But this is the dishonest kind of stuff that they come up with. Oh, no, we're not holding anyone collectively responsible. No, we're not saying the Serbs are guilty. Yeah, of course you say. That's exactly what you're saying. The Serbs are collectively guilty. Taking note of the role of the Secretary General, blah, blah. And then it goes on with the preamble, noting the prosecution of persons responsible for genocide and other international crimes in national justice, blah, blah, and so it goes on about the ICTY. And then it says it's essential in fostering peace, justice, truth, and reconciliation among other countries in the region. Of course, it's doing nothing of the sort. It's causing bitterness. And of course, it's not providing us with truth, because what the ICTY notoriously hasn't done is actually investigate what the hell happened in Srebrenica. Who really did this? Other than this one person who is clearly a mentally troubled young man, Drazen Erdemovic, you don't have anyone. You don't know who did what and who ordered anyone to do anything. But they never wanted to. That's the whole point. It's like the Nord Stream gas pipeline. They never wanted to get to the bottom of this, because Srebrenica was too useful as a myth, rather than as a crime to be investigated. It's the founding myth of NATO. Anyway, he goes on, reiterating unwavering commitment to the maintaining stability and fostering unity and diversity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unity and diversity. I mean, this is so hilarious. The same people who said that Yugoslavia needed to break up because it was the prison house of nations, even though Yugoslavia had been around for 75, almost 75 years, though it's a prison. We need to break it up. But now apparently we have to keep Bosnia and Herzegovina together, even though the majority of its residents don't want that state to keep together. If you look at the Serbs, the Bosnian Serbs and the Bosnian Croats together, they form a majority, and they don't want that state to continue. But now we have to force them to live in this prison house. Noting that 2025 will mark the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, blah, blah. Oh, it's 8,372. This is always the classic when they make this amazing kind of accurate numbers, when you don't even know how many people were living in Srebrenica on July the 11th, 1995, when Serb forces entered. You don't know how many were living there, because many people had left many people who had gone to Srebrenica, who were fleeing the war. There was no census. There was no one knew anything. And as I said, bodies were being moved from morgue to morgue, from burial site to burial site, just in order to beef up the numbers. And then here we are. So here's the resolution. One decides to designate July the 11th as the International Day of Reflection and Commemoration of the 1995 genocide in Srebrenica, to be observed annually. Condemns without any reservation any denial of the Srebrenica genocide as a historical event, and urges member states to preserve the established facts, which again were never established, including through their educational systems by developing appropriate programs also in remembrance towards preventing denial and distortion and occurrence of genocides in the future. And then condemns without reservations actions that glorify those convicted of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide by international courts, including those responsible for the Srebrenica genocide. So this is when they demonize the Serbs, because who are the people who supposedly glorify those convicted of war crimes? Remember, nobody really glorifies anyone. What the Serbs say is that this is a crock, and we are being blamed for something that didn't happen, and you're asking us to hate and denounce leaders who were fighting for us in that civil war, a civil war again that was provoked by the NATO powers through its outrageous intervention in Yugoslavia to break up Yugoslavia. The wars that were inevitable and were predicted at the time would follow the breakup of Yugoslavia, the breakup which was promoted by the Western powers. And then to declare that those Serbs who said, hey, well, these were our leaders, and we fought in the civil war, and we achieved something in the civil war. We achieved our own kind of Republika Srpska. Otherwise, we'd have just simply been wiped out in our own state. You must condemn your leaders. You must stand up and do a mea culpa and condemn your own leaders. Emphasizes the importance of completing the process of finding and identifying the remaining victims of the Srebrenica genocide and according them dignified burial, and calls for the continued prosecution of those perpetrators of the Srebrenica genocide that have yet to face justice. So we're going to, so it's a kind of ongoing thing. You know, we're just going to go on forever, going after the perpetrators. Incidentally, the remarkable thing is that I told you about this Drazen Erdemovic, who according to his story, he was responsible for killing about 1,000 captured Muslims. He named a few people who were in that unit, that mercenary unit, the 10th Sabotage Detachment. He named several people. Not one of those people was ever prosecuted. So all those people he had named, that they were part of this 10th Sabotage Detachment, not one of them was ever prosecuted. Which it tells you, well, maybe they weren't that keen on getting to the bottom of this. Then he goes on, urges all states to fully adhere to their obligation under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crimes of Genocide, and blah, blah, and customary international law on genocide prevention. You got to keep genocide. They can just keep repeating. These, incidentally, are the people who have been fulminating, the British, the Germans, the Americans. They've been fulminating over the past few days about the ICC. And remember, they're not even accusing Israel of genocide. They've not said Israel committed genocide, but they've been fulminating at the temerity of the International Criminal Court, which is a kind of a successor to the ad hoc courts like the ICTY and the Rwanda Tribunal, had the temerity of holding Israeli leaders accountable for its war crimes and its crimes against humanity. How dare they? How dare anyone do that? And then they solemnly talk about, well, prevention of genocide. We have to, make sure there's accountability. Requests the Secretary General to establish an outreach program entitled Srebrenica Genocide in the United Nations, and then starting in 2025, and then goes on, invites all member states, organizations of the United Nations systems, other international and regional organizations, civil societies, including non-governmental organizations, blah, blah, including special observances and activities in memory and honor of the victims of the 1995 genocide in Srebrenica. So this is the thing. And now, of course, the Serbs were very unhappy about this because they're going to be eternally damned in the eyes of the world. This is for always. The other thing is, and this was something that was brought up by the Russian a permanent representative to the UN, which is the Bosnia-Herzegovina is supposed to have a tripartite presidency. They can't make any decisions without the approval of all three presidents. And the presidents represent the three distinct nations that comprise Bosnia and Herzegovina: the Serbs, the Muslims, and the Croats. Now, the Bosnia and Herzegovina rushed to say, yeah, we saw this earlier. We support this resolution. But of course, the Serb president said, no, we don't support it. And if the Serb president says we don't support it, then essentially it cannot go forward. There has to be agreement from all three member nations of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So here, what happened was, this I just want to show you that this was the UN Security Council from 2015, the one that the British put forward. And, you can see, though, condemns in the strongest terms genocide and all violation, blah, blah, condemns in the strongest terms the crime of genocide in Srebrenica, established by the judgments of the ICTY and ICJ. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, did not establish any judgments. The ICJ just simply took on board, which they shouldn't have done, but they nonetheless did, the rulings of the ICTY. The ICTY had made all these genocide rulings, and the ICJ said, well, we accept that. So they didn't do any separate adjudication of the facts themselves. They just simply took on board everything the ICTY. So just putting the two together as if, well, the two separate courts found this. No, two separate courts didn't find this. It was just the ICTY determined this. And all other proven war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in the course of the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, agrees that acceptance of the tragic events at Srebrenica's genocide is a prerequisite for reconciliation. They always said it's a prerequisite for reconciliation. There is no reconciliation. None. There's none. I mean, there's more hatred and bitterness now in the Balkans than there was back in the 90s. And that's the whole point. This is a lie that is put forward by the ICTY, but by these UN states who fuel divisions, who fuel wars, and then they say, well, we're just trying to bring reconciliation. There's no reconciliation. If you take a one-sided approach, if you say that the Serbs are the evil party and the Muslims are their victims, then you have essentially cause bitter divisions within Bosnia and Herzegovina, because the Serbs obviously definitely did not agree that they were the villains of the war. And then condemns the denial of genocide, the same blah, blah, expresses its sympathy for and solidarity with the victims on all sides of the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is the fig leaf that they have. They express sympathy and solidarity for all sides, the victims on all sides of the war. But of course, they've never shed a single tear for any Serbs and for any of Croats in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, the Muslims were deemed to be the client states of the Western powers, particularly the United States, and they were then deemed to be the victims, though they definitely were not. It was a bitter three-sided war. There were in fact more sides because there was a lot of divisions among the Muslim forces as well, which is very rarely discussed in the Western media. But among the Muslims, there was the forces of Fikret Abdic, whom the West didn't like, as opposed to Aliya Izetbegovic, the Islamist leader of the Muslims, whom the West favored. And then this is the point that was made by the Serb member of the presidency, who's saying that is saying that there are abuses that are taking place. It's a violation of the constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that he wasn't consulted about this, and then that I wish to inform you that those responsible for such actions on behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina, including the head of the permanent mission of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the UN, will face criminal proceedings before the competent authorities in the country. Additionally, I wish to inform you that I have initiated the necessary procedure for his recall within the presidency. And then I'm deeply convinced that Bosnia and Herzegovina can only progress by strictly adhering to its constitutional solutions. We hope its European future can be safeguarded by its democratically elected institutions. The flagrant violation of the Dayton constitutional arrangement, which is based solely on the authority of force and favors only one of the three constituent peoples, leads to further divisions and directly threatens the country's future existence. Anyway, Hungary, to its credit, has said that it will vote against the UN resolution commemorating the genocide. And then the Hungarian foreign, there were good relations between Hungary and Serbia, and Hungary and the Republic of Srpska. And says here that Seato said Hungary would vote against the resolution, which he called the Srebrenica tragedy. This is a sneering reference. I think it's an AP story, because it intentionally or unintentionally would demonize, well, of course, it intentionally would demonize the entire Serbian nation. We believe that international political actors should end the escalation of tensions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to end the threat of sanctions and end the violent interference in its internal affairs. Absolutely correct. But sadly, very few Europeans are talking in this way. And then we have, this head of the Srebrenica Memorial Center says, Orban's opposition to the resolution on Srebrenica can be seen as part of a broader pattern of rejecting international consensus on human rights issues, and the consensus, and so on. And then we have Dodik. Now, Milorad Dodik is the president of the Republika Srpska. And I think, veteran gagglers know that I'm not a huge fan of Dodik. He's another one of these leaders, not unlike Orban, who kind of marches you up the hill. He's going to do this, he's going to do that, he's going to take on the powers that be, and then he kind of marches down again. But anyway, he's plenty mad about this. He's saying, by pushing the resolution on Srebrenica to the UN General Assembly, Bosniak politicians, in Bosniak is this term that's been appropriated by the Bosnian Muslims. I mean, during the 90s, they were always referred to as the Muslims, but somehow they got Bosniak. So no one quite is aware that it only refers to one of the national groups of Bosnia. And will permanently destroy any possibility of any agreement with the Serbs. by completely abusing and privatizing institutions by Bosniak, sponsored by Germany. It's always Germany. They show that Bosnia and Herzegovina cannot survive this fraud related to Srebrenica. And then everything related to Srebrenica is a political project that should permanently mark the Serbian people, and history will show whether it is the project of former American President Bill Clinton and then Bosniak leader in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Alija Izetbegovic. And then Serbs must not fall for these provocations by Bosniak politicians and their sponsors from the West, who then, and still now, aim to demonize the Serbian people. There is a serious evidence that Srebrenica was an agreement between Alija Izetbegovic and Bill Clinton. Even in that sense, the events in Srebrenica cannot be characterized as genocide under international law. The reference that he's making about this agreement between Izetbegovic and Bill Clinton is something that was this, it took place in a meeting, and there's a record of that. It was in the ICTY archives. Very difficult to get hold of the archives now. That Izetbegovic met the. Oh, I have to. So Izetbegovic met his leaders of the Muslims, and he made clear to them, if you want an American intervention, and we can only win this war if we get the Americans involved, if you want American intervention, we're going to have some kind of a massacre of the Bosnian Muslims. And then he said, that's the only way we can do it. We need a massacre. So that's when all the suspicions have arisen as to, how did this come about, that just at the right time, there was a massacre. And then he says, Bosniak and Germans primarily, who want to wash away their criminal past, now want to force the issue through political violence. We Serbs say that it was not genocide and that we do not accept any resolutions or platforms as a nation. We should reject the imposition of this issue and not give it any color. So you can see here that what the goal here is, that to present, first of all, NATO as the knights in shining armor rushing to the rescue of damsels in distress, the villains are, of course, the Serbs. And why were the Serbs deemed to be the villains? Well, the Serbs were a stand-in for Russia. It was all part of a project to push Russia out of the Balkans once and for all. And so therefore the Serbs had to be defeated. So that once the Serbs were defeated, the Russians' kind of little brother, then essentially Russian influence would be eliminated from the Balkans altogether. And let's remember, Russia used to have a very big presence in the Balkans because they had fought wars against the Turks during the 19th century. In fact, they liberated the Slavs, the Christian Slavs of the Balkans, many of whom looked very favorably upon Russia because they were the people who liberated them from the rule of the Ottomans. And the whole purpose of what the Western powers was doing was essentially to push the Russians out of the Balkans once and for all. And they had to go after the Serbs. And it's an ongoing project, and may yet yield all sorts of success. The Serbs are very vulnerable. They're still very sore from the terrible beating they got from NATO in the 90s, and NATO could start up this war anytime it wants, and this resolution will only help facilitate NATO's task. Once you've determined, hey, these people are genocidal, then pretty much anything goes. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this resolution. It's an absolutely terrible idea. Unfortunately, a number of stupid countries are going to go and vote for it. So I would expect that it will pass. Probably by nowhere near the kind of majority that the NATO powers are hoping it'll pass, but it probably will pass. Anyway, Thank you very much. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.